Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I hope you are doing well wherever and whenever this finds you. Today, I want to talk about fear of spiritual connection, or like fear of spirituality, fear of intuition, intuitive gifts, spiritual gifts, like that. I want to talk about that. I haven't quite figured out what I want to title this, but it's like something along those lines, right? I was sitting on my couch trying to figure out what to talk about in this podcast, and I first went to ChatGPT because everyone keeps telling me that I need to use AI to brainstorm. And I will give ChatGPT some credit because it did come up with some really good ideas. However, I was sorting through them and nothing felt just right. And so I reminded myself, like, Lisa, we are going inward for the answers. That is what we are practicing. We're going inward for the answers. And so I was like, okay, let me sit down, let me connect to my higher self, my soul, and just ask, like, what should we talk about on the podcast? And I did that, and I sat quiet for a few minutes, and I started to see images pop up into my head, pop up into my mind, pop up, whatever, you get it. And first was a DM that I got on TikTok a while back, and it was someone who was sharing with me that they were experiencing intuition or intuitive gifts, but they had some conflict around it when they were young because of their religious upbringing and it being labeled as demonic. And then I was having more, I guess, images or maybe like memories flash into my mind of just different times where I had conversations with people in my life who have a level of intuition and have seen things that scared them, or have known things, heard things, have had intuition and it scared them. And, I don't know a lot of people in my personal life that are in this the way that I am and like pursuing it the way that I am, but I do know a lot of people who are intuitive, and I feel like a common thread between a lot of those people is that there is fear around that. Even like my dad, I know, I come from this lineage of healers, and so there are a lot of people in my family that are intuitive, and it's always been more of like these things that you kind of like push away a little bit because you don't quite know how to work with it. So I think that this is worthy of discussing. I want to share my experience. I had a lot of fear stepping into this. I continue to have fear stepping into my own intuition, my own intuitive gifts, and so it's layered, but I want to talk about just how I have been navigating that and just how my experience has been. So, for starters, I will start by saying that before like truly exploring this space, everything that I believed to be true about anything spiritual or supernatural stemmed from a few different things. One being movies and TV. My sister, she's 2 years older, and she was so into this type of stuff growing up, like these type of movies growing up. Like, I remember her making us watch Practical Magic a million times. That movie scared me. I remember her making us watch The Haunting a million times. That movie was terrifying. Like, she just this was her genre, and we watched a lot of movies in this space, and it always, like, it was terrifying for me. And even as an adult, I've always stayed far away from, I don't know, scary movies for sure, but especially any scary movies that dealt with like demonic entities or anything along those lines. I was like, I'm not touching that. So a lot of my beliefs stem from that early on. And then also my own religious upbringing. I did not grow up super religious. I was raised Catholic, and it was the kind of Catholic where we were not attending church every Sunday, but I did go through, First Communion and confirmation and those sorts of things. So there were, things that I had listened to growing up and things that I had heard growing up. The thing about my relationship with Catholicism is even as I was growing up, I had more questions than I had answers. So as you go to Bible study and you like study these different things, it just there were things that just never quite clicked for me, and I had a lot of questions. So even with that upbringing, I would say I still had fears that, some of this stuff may be demonic. I think that's just so ingrained. And the last thing that played a role in my beliefs growing up is, some people may relate to this and some people may have never heard of this before. But growing up in, I think specifically a Hispanic household, I had heard of practices like black magic growing up. And I did not know anybody practicing them, but my parents had told me stories of people that they had known, or, just hearing of things of that nature. And I wasn't sure if I believed any of that to be true, but it was something that I had been made aware of at a young age. And just when I started to get into this space, something that was in the back of my mind of like, how do I know that this isn't black magic? So those are the things that sort of shaped what I believed to be true about spirituality and the supernatural before actually doing any level of exploration. Also, just the term psychic, like I feel like I had a negative connotation of what that meant, because what I believed to be true about psychics also stemmed from like movies and TV, and I didn't have an accurate understanding of what that meant or what that was. So when I first started consuming spiritual or like specifically channeled content, I had a lot of inner conflict, because on one end, everything was resonating as truth in my body. And when I say it resonates as truth in my body, it's like this, yeah, it's a very somatic feeling of just like light bulbs, just like things clicking. Like I talked about how, growing up Catholic, things just didn't quite click for me. It didn't quite make sense. Not everything, but just like there were a lot of things that didn't make sense to me. And then when I started consuming this spiritual content, it was like, oh my gosh, things are clicking. They're making sense for me in a way that they've never made sense for me before. And so I was experiencing that, but at the same time, always in the back of my mind, this voice of like, but how do I know it's not demonic? But how do I know this isn't black magic? How can I be so sure? And because of that, I really didn't tell anyone that I was interested in this type of stuff when I first started like listening to podcasts in this space and stuff, because I had so much curiosity, and I found myself just day after day just wanting to come back for more and more and more. But I was not embarrassed, but just like, I don't know what to call it. Was it shame? No. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't want people to think that I was crazy. Maybe, you know what? Maybe I wasn't quite convinced that I wasn't crazy. And so I didn't want anyone else to know that this is the type of information that I was consuming. Anything that like can't be proven can be considered conspiracy, and people get a little bit weird about things that are unseen and unproven. So that was my experience early on, like in the very, very beginning of this journey. So when I first discovered that I was an energy healer, I've shared that story many times, but what I haven't quite talked about was how much fear I had around it. So on one end, it was like, oh my God, this beautiful gift, and this is just the most wild thing I've ever experienced, and it rocked my world. And for the most part, I was grateful and I was excited, and it felt like this beautiful gift. I really did feel that. On the other end, there was a part of me that had fear around it. And for me, the fear was stemming from, how do I know what energy I'm working with? Like, how can I be so sure? Because I went to the trainings, I learned how to set intention, I learned how to protect myself, and those were all tools that I was using. I was thorough, and there was still a piece of me that was like, but how do I really know? How can I be so sure that I am working with energy of the highest light and love. And what actually ended up happening was, I think this was after my Reiki 1 training and before my Reiki 2 training. There was like a 2-month gap between the two trainings. My hands turned off. And by turned off, I mean when I first started experiencing energy healing, I could feel the energy in my hands. It was so strong. I could feel the intensity of the energy coming through my body, and that energy would move my hands. I wasn't moving them, the energy would move my hands, and it would scan someone's body, and the hands would then drop in specific areas. Or when I was working on myself, my hands were moving in like a lot of different ways, and when they turned off, it just all shut off. So I would sit down in an attempt to do energy healing on myself, and I would call in the energy, and I would feel nothing, and my hands would not move. And I think the fear blocked me from this gift. And so bringing it back required claiming it, saying, no, I want this, and beginning to navigate that fear that I was experiencing and begin to overcome it. So how did I overcome the fear? Well, as people say, I had to walk through the dark to know the light. I had to walk through the dark to know the light. So what actually ended up happening is, after my Reiki attunements, that increased my energetic sensitivity. Because if anyone is not familiar with a Reiki attunement, how my Reiki master described it was like Reiki times 1,000. So it was like I don't know if you call it like a ritual or like a ceremony that took place during every Reiki attunement that we had at our trainings. But you can think of it as just raising our vibration. So when you receive Reiki, it's like clearing out a lot of the lower vibrational energies that weigh you down. And when you clear that out, you raise your vibration. And when you raise your vibration, you increase your energetic sensitivity. So that took place. And when I increased my energetic sensitivity, I began to experience a lot of different things. I began to feel the presence of energies in my room at night, and occasionally out and about. Like, there was one instance at work where I can think of feeling the presence of an energy. I can think of an instance where I was sitting in a nail shop. So it would happen to me randomly, but it happened very frequently at night. Sometimes it would even wake me up from my sleep. And I wasn't seeing anything, I wasn't hearing anything. I was feeling the presence. I just knew there was a presence in my space. And I even had experiences of feeling like something touched my hand, or like something touched my leg. It was not just the presence in the room, it was like presence touching me, if that makes sense. What else did I experience? I'll say that when I was experiencing the presence of energies in my room, or the presence of energies touching me, that energy felt more neutral. And I had other experiences where the energy felt more negative. So, for example, I went to my Reiki trainings, and if you are familiar with my story, I discovered I was an energy healer through a somatic hypnotherapy session. So I'd been doing somatic hypnotherapy, and in my 10th session, I think it was my 10th, it just like unlocked. I could feel the energy in my hands, and the rest is history. I went to my Reiki trainings after that, and I came back to hypnotherapy because I still had more sessions to complete. And in one session, we went down into a state of hypnosis, and what I immediately felt was fear and confusion and brain fog. And I was trying to understand, is this coming up because this is somatically something that I need to release, or is this something else? Like, this was feeling like it might be something else. And luckily my hypnotherapist is intuitive, and so she said something along the lines of like, you know, don't forget to protect your energy, or something like that. And so I cleared myself right then and there, and it all vanished. The fear vanished, the confusion, the brain fog had vanished. And that was my first instance of experiencing a more, what I would classify as like a negative energy. And I remember being like really scared in that moment. And she was just trying to calm me down. And she was like, don't worry about it. Like, it's okay. Like, all you have to do is protect yourself. Like, having more experience did not fear it. And so that kind of helped calm me down. But I was also like, oh my God, like what just happened? And then after that, I can think of like one situation where I was meditating by myself and the experience, what it felt like an energy like jumping into my body. And the second it happened, I almost like fell over. I was sitting down and it kind of like knocked me to the side. And again, it was this feeling of like confusion and brain fog and maybe less fear that time, but still this like strong sensation that I knew immediately what it was. And I can say for sure the confusion and brain fog that I experience is immediate and it's strong because I know how to clear myself and I have these specific prayers that I say and I do it every day. I know these by heart. And in this instance, it's like I forget them. Like it's so hard to try and remember what they are. That's how strong the confusion and the brain fog is for me. I've also had experiences of like lying in my bed at night and feeling energies jump into my throat specifically. And this whole past year, I've been doing work to clear and balance my throat chakra because that was a big block. It's the reason for this podcast, getting on TikTok, learning how to speak my truth, and just the process of finding my voice. And so it's really interesting to me that I have felt these more negative energies jumping directly into my throat. I'm not going to make assumptions about what that means, but that is something that I have experienced. And so then just immediately I would use my hands to just like clear that energy from my throat. What else? I've also had a few nightmares involving negative entities, energies, and each time it's been something along the lines of like I'm asleep or I'm lying in bed and I start to feel this like, if anyone has ever had like sleep paralysis, and when you have it, sometimes you can just sense like I don't know, it's like almost like a black shadow or like a black blob coming into your space. So this wasn't sleep paralysis. I have experienced sleep paralysis, but this wasn't that. These were nightmares, but it's similar of like a dark shadow coming in to my room. And that energy, that black shadow, whatever, it would pull at my feet. Those were the nightmares I was having. And then I would have to like scream, leave me alone. And the second I said leave or leave me alone or something along those lines, it would vanish. So these are a few things that I experienced, and I remember many times these things happening and me thinking, what the hell did I do? Like, was this a mistake to pursue energy healing, to pursue Reiki, to get trained in this, because now I'm having these experiences that are scary. But in reflection, looking back, these experiences were a gift because, like I said, I had to walk through the dark to know the light. What these experiences taught me were one, discernment. One, discernment. I had this ongoing question of like, how do I know what energy I'm working with? When I'm channeling energy, like, how can I be so sure of what this is? Like, yes, I'm setting intention. Yes, I'm doing these things, but how can I really know? And experiencing the sensation, the feeling of the presence of these negative energies, experiencing, the confusion and the brain fog and the fear, it's the difference is so noticeable to me. And it's not a question of like, is this? It's like when I feel that presence, the knowing is instant. And so now when I sit and do energy work, I no longer have this question of like, what energy am I working with? Because I've experienced both. And I can say wholeheartedly that I can feel the difference, and it is clear as day. So I think that for that reason, those experiences were a gift because they taught me discernment. And discernment is like the the core. It's so important to this type of work. Aside from discernment, learning about the impact of these negative energies and feeling the impact of that on my body was also really important because it taught me that they can't harm me, at least in the way that I believed that they could through the movies I've seen, the TV shows, everything that I mentioned being taught when I was young. I think that we have this image or this idea of what negative energies are based on a lot of that. And I won't claim there to be one objective truth, but what I have experienced for myself has been different than what I was exposed to at an earlier age. So I think that in a lot of ways, I was able to take my power back because I was able to stop fearing it. So when I've experienced negative energies, what that has felt like for me, in those specific examples I gave, it's been this sensation of fear and confusion and brain fog coming over me. And the other example I'll give is when I first started practicing Reiki. So I was like newly certified, still like figuring things out. And I started to do energy work on my mom. She was at my house every day at the time, taking care of my son, and she was experiencing a lot of pain. And so I thought, let me just put my hands on her for 15 minutes a day and see if that can help her in any way. And what happened is after about a week, I started to feel really depressed. And I realized that it was because I was not yet effectively clearing my own energy. So I was taking a lot of the negative or lower vibrational energy from her, bringing it into my own body, and then not clearing it from myself properly, not transmuting that energy properly. And what that began to feel like was depression. I've also had experiences of just hanging out with large groups of people and then the next day feeling depression out of nowhere, or just like this sadness where I didn't know where it was coming from. So a lot of these experiences, by the way, are before I was protecting my energy every morning. I was protecting my energy and clearing my spaces. Sometimes I knew how to do it. I was specifically doing this when I was doing energy healing, but building these energetic habits, the clearing and the protection, into my daily routine has been really helpful to alleviate all of this. But I'm just bringing this up to share that experiencing the impact of negative energies on myself has been really helpful to know that it can't harm me in the way that I believed that it could. I mean, obviously, nobody wants to experience depression or depressive symptoms of depression. But at the same time, it is, in my opinion, not as scary as the terrifying types of things you see in movies sometimes. I forgot to mention negative self-talk too. So I'll say depression and negative self-talk because I have done a lot of work to raise my own vibration. I don't experience as much negative self-talk as I once did. So if it pops up out of nowhere, then to me, that's usually a sign. One of the things that I do is I will clear myself. So these were experiences that I was having and they taught me a lot, and I believe that they served a purpose and occurred for a reason to teach me discernment and to help me overcome the fear. But there were also some things that I did intentionally and proactively, and that really involved empowering myself with knowledge. So I turned to mentors for help. One, my Reiki master. When I was having the experience of the presence of energies in my room and it was happening every night, I went to her, and she's intuitive and she tuned in. And what she actually said to me was that in a past life, I had been someone who helped people cross over. She used a Spanish term for it, and I don't remember what it was, but she said that that's something that I had done. And so when I, did my Reiki training, I kind of like stepped into or began to step into this role she said what she was seeing is I was like this like bright light that turned on, and it was like, hey, I'm here, like everybody could see me. And so I was having a lot of these visitations at night of people coming to me, and I can't confirm whether it was for help or what it was, because I wasn't at the time, I wasn't speaking to these energies, I was just feeling their presence. And what she recommended to me was a specific crystal for protection that I can place in my room. She also, said that if this is not something that I wanted to do in this lifetime, then that was up to me and I could set those boundaries. And she taught me how to set those boundaries for myself. And so I remember at the time, every night I would put myself in a protective bubble before I slept. And eventually that worked and I stopped feeling the presence of energies in my room. So she helped me understand what I was experiencing and then taught me what to do in those situations. And that was incredibly helpful. Also, through my intuitive mentorship program that I did, it was like I think it was like a year ago now. Time has flown. But, anyways, in that program, I feel like we dived into learning about negative energies, negative entities on a different level. Like, we went deep in. And having that deep level of understanding, again, helped to empower me. It helped me to know that I had the power to clear myself and to clear spaces and to clear others when I am doing healing. The thing about when you work in the energetic realms operate on intention and belief. So I was setting intention and I had the technique to clear from the very beginning. But the piece that I had to work on was the belief in my own power to do it. And that is something that has, one, I would say it's just been a progression, and two, that mentorship program. When I came out of that mentorship program, I felt so confident and I have not questioned my ability or my own power to clear myself, to clear a space, etc. ever since. So having proper mentorship was so helpful for me. Again, just equipping myself with the knowledge of what to do. In addition to that, something else that was really helpful for me specifically was actually learning about Black magic. I had mentioned that, I had heard about that from a young age. I didn't really know what I believed to be true about it, but I just remember having an awareness of it at a young age, and then, that coming back, and I can be very literal sometimes, okay? No, I can be very literal often. And so for me, when I started to learn about, working with energy and, the spiritual space, my mind went to, okay, a spell and a prayer are both words said with intention. What's the difference? So learning what Black magic specifically is, which I don't know if you're someone who is familiar with this, who's ever heard of this, and so I'll just, in case it helps you too, I learned that the difference was those who are practicing Black magic in some way, they are setting intention to take away someone else's free will choice. Like if you could break it down, that is what it would break down into. So, you hear of people doing love spells on someone else, and that would be taking away someone else's free will choice. And energies of the highest light and love are never going to participate in taking away someone's free will choice. So in order to practice that type of energetic work, you would have to be working with negative entities or energies. So that was really helpful to me to know the difference, and, further clarified for me and just solidified that that's not what I was practicing. So yeah, just equipping myself with so much knowledge and so much, the level of detail that I was able to learn from these different mentors has helped me so much, because I think that knowledge is power, and that is just something that really helps me. So where am I at now? I said in the beginning that this fear of spiritual gifts and intuitive gifts and spiritual connection, my fear is layered. So I feel like I've overcome this fear of like, is this demonic? And this fear of negative energies. I don't feel like that's something that's coming up for me anymore. Now, what I've started to dive into the deeper layers is, okay, so where am I at now? As I mentioned in the beginning, my fears of, intuitive gifts, spiritual connection, it is layered. So I feel like I have overcome, those questions of like, is this demonic? And fear of negative energies or entities, that's no longer showing up for me. But we are diving into deeper layers. So in my last episode, I mentioned experiencing my first shamanic journey. I've experienced 2 at this point in time, and I will be having another one tomorrow. So it's been really interesting because I feel like, in the beginning, it was just this period of exploration where I was just trying a lot of different things, seeing what stuck, learning resonance, and that got me to a certain point of discovering I was an energy healer. And then over the last year, as I've talked about on this podcast, I feel like it was a lot of healing, and I feel like it was coming home to myself, coming home to my voice, coming home to my body. It was like, who is Lisa? And coming home to that. And now I feel like I've ventured into this deeper layer, this new journey through these shamanic journeys of starting to uncover, okay, now who am I as a soul? And what has been coming up in these sessions are a lot of different past lives that I've had as a healer, where I have either been harmed or killed, or my family was harmed because of these spiritual abilities that I've had in these past lives. And so we've been working to clear a lot of those past life traumas in order to help me move past my fear or resistance of stepping into that in this lifetime. So the fears that I'm navigating are a little bit different now. The fears that are showing up for me at this point in time of like, what if I fully turn on my clairvoyance and see something scary, or start to see things that are scary? And I think that that's a common fear that I've heard many times. I'm also, I have this fear of like, what if I turn on these gifts, like if I fully turn on these gifts, and then it feels like a mushroom trip for the rest of my life that I cannot escape. It feels so silly and illogical as I say this out loud because of everything that I have learned, but that's real. Those fears are present. I feel like I have this fear of, what if I fully turn this on and I end up losing people in my life? There's just so much unknown. So diving into these shamanic journeys has been really fascinating because, yeah, it's showing me that the fears that are present today can be stemming from, not just inner child stuff, not just ancestral stuff, but they can be coming from past lives too. So there's just a lot of clearing taking place, and I'm really excited to see how these sessions continue to evolve and how I continue to evolve going through them. So that is where I will leave you today. I hope this was helpful to anyone maybe navigating something similar, or maybe you know someone who's navigating something similar. You never know. But thank you for taking the time to listen regardless, and I will see you all again soon. Bye.